Well, welcome. I'm delighted to see you here on this early morning where it seems possible that spring might be upon us. And we are going to talk this morning about powerlessness, the welcoming prayer, and the slow work of God. So let us begin. In an illuminating article published in 2014 in the Contemplative Outreach News, Father Thomas Keating wrote, "Powerlessness is our greatest treasure. Don't try to get rid of it. Everything in us wants to get rid of it. To be in too big a hurry to get over our difficulties is a mistake because you don't know how valuable they are from God's perspective. For without them, you might never be transformed." Father Thomas cites 2 Corinthians, verse 19, in which Paul wrote, "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness." And then writes that grace is something we cannot understand. Neither can we understand transformation, the process of coming to terms with our human weakness as we experience it, coming to know, as Paul wrote, "Whenever I am weak, then I am strong." Perhaps we can recognize this as coming to terms with the false self system, the homemade self, built since before birth to satisfy our programs for happiness, our desires for safety and security, esteem and affection, and power and control. Our presence here this morning is all the evidence we need to know that we have begun the hard work of reducing our emotional investments in the programs of early childhood. We have again and again let go of the thinking that arises in silent prayer, returning ever so gently, using what my dear friend Nancy calls the sacred reminder, only to find that although we might be thinking something different, soon we are once again thinking. Really, it seems to me, there is nothing else so effective for recalibrating our self-aggrandizement. Humility in a gift bag. And when we take this practice of letting go into daily life through the welcoming prayer, the opportunities for humility multiply. This brings to mind the parable of Martha and Mary of Bethany. Returning to Jerusalem for what we would come to know as his preparation for crucifixion, Jesus and his disciples stopped at the home of Martha and Mary. Martha welcomed him into their home, but it was Mary who sat at his feet and listened to him speaking. In due course, Martha, who was doing all the work of serving, complained to Jesus and asked him to tell her, Mary, to help with the serving. Jesus declined, saying, "As you know, Mary has chosen the good portion. It is not to be taken from her." That's Luke 10:42 in the English Standard Revision. This is often interpreted as a teaching on the greater importance of the contemplative life relative to daily life, particularly when translated not as the good portion, but as the better part. But it can also be seen as a lesson on the importance of both. Jesus telling Martha to examine her motives for complaining and her need to make space in her life for contemplation, while also warning Mary that the contemplative life is incomplete without service. Perhaps we may see both of these sisters at work in our own lives. Martha, the busy false self system, and Mary, the work of seeking the true self, the divine self within. From this perspective, the intention becomes the integration of the two sisters, working together harmoniously, as sisters do when we are at our best. The false self is the homemade self, the patterns of thoughts, feelings, and actions we have developed from the earliest experiences of our lives, even beginning prenatally. These are deeply unconscious, not available to our thinking minds. And so, for the most part, we cannot think our way out of them. Some body-centered therapies, therapeutic hypnosis, and the newer neurotherapies can help with alleviating distressing symptoms. But no therapy I'm aware of can work at the level that Thomas Keating describes as the divine therapy. And for this, we must relinquish our confidence in and our mistaken dependence on the powers of the false self-system and find our way to powerlessness. The divine therapy works with mind and emotions to deepen levels of awareness through two methods: contemplative prayer and the process of welcoming. It can also be understood as deepening levels of letting go of the conscious and unconscious controls of the false self-system, deepening levels of embracing powerlessness. So let's look at this diagram on the levels of awareness. And I think I can share it. Okay, let's go to, no, I have to do it this way. Share screen. Put this one in front. Put this one in front. Well, I'm sorry. Let's open this one. And now.
Which one would you like to share,
The
Catherine?
levels of awareness. Yes,
There we go.
Thank you. We should have done that in the beginning, Jane. It was a lot easier. All right. So if we look at these levels of awareness, we see that we are moving from the ordinary awareness of daily life into growing spiritual awareness. And this begins as through the practice of silent prayer, contemplative prayer, and welcoming prayer, we begin to broaden our window of awareness and loosen the white knuckle grip that we have on the ordinary awareness of daily life. And with continued practice, we begin to have access to the sense of the true self. And this is the growing, the part of the self that can become aware of the divine presence that is the center of our very being. And the sad thing about it for me is how many of us, maybe not us on this call, because we're actively committed to this practice of discovering the divine presence within. But so many of the people in our world and in our even who we know in our lives have not got an inkling that the Christ is hidden within us. And when we begin to know that, even while we're far away from experiencing it, it changes everything. So, from the outermost ring moving inward, the influence of the false self-system decreases, and the sense of powerlessness grows. For the false self-system that feels powerful, it is the false self-system that feels powerful and wants to be in charge. Perhaps you had not thought before that powerlessness is something we should seek, or that the practice of welcoming is a way of embracing powerlessness. But it is essential if we are to get out of God's way as his presence within us transforms us to embrace powerlessness. So let's just briefly visit how the fault system works to hold on to control of awareness and action, to hold on to its idea of what power is. So can we look at the other one, James? Yes, okay. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but I think it's always a good idea to review it from time to time. These 3 points of the emotional programs for happiness triangle are the desires we let go of in the welcoming prayer. These are the desires that create and interpret the events of daily life. They function outside of consciousness, showing their effects in experience that create inner and outer conflicts. So, as you know, they are our desire for safety and security, our desire for esteem and affection, our desire for power and control. And these are Henri Nouwen's lies. I am what I have. I am what others think of me. I am what I can do. And it isn't that we don't need these in our lives. It's just that we have built up a whole false system that tells us how we are to achieve them. And they are deeply unconscious. And when they enter into consciousness, we often first become aware of them as a frustration. So the moment a disruption in experiences a frustration of the programs for happiness, enters consciousness, then we have a moment of choice. Right at that point, we have a choice to do something different. So everything in our fault system, this is what we're working against. Everything in our fault self system is poised to tell us to hold on to its ways of holding on to power, which go down this way and make this stronger, these emotional programs stronger. And here we are trying to make a choice to do something different. One of the choices we have is to welcome and let go of the desire of the very things that are underneath the frustration that make up the emotional programs for happiness. But it certainly isn't an easy thing because our fault system, which takes care of us in its opinion in daily life, is telling us to do what we always do. Not to ask ourselves to let go of desires to change our experience. We are letting go of desires arising from our ideas about how fundamental requirements for human life are met. Amazingly, however, when we manage to do this, we open a space for God's action in meeting our needs. By becoming powerless through welcoming and letting go, we make a space for God's presence and action to do its work. So that's all, James. We can close that. So together, let's practice the welcoming prayer as it's taught by Contemplative Outreach, beginning with the body scan. The following is adapted from the Contemplative Life Program book, Welcoming Prayer, Consent on the Go. So now, the three, as you know, the three stages of this are to scan your body, focus and sink into what you discover there, then welcome it, and then let it go. So let me take us through this together. So begin by getting comfortable. Most of us are seated, so you can be seated in a comfortable position. And know that your body know that your body is the warehouse of the unconscious. You will begin by scanning it with your intuitive eye, discovering discomfort, pain, uneasiness, even an itch, a sense of heat, cold, tension, any sensation. Pay special attention to the sensations that you discover. Do not resist them, simply experience them. And as you move gently through your body, whenever you discover a feeling, welcome it. Whether you experience it as positive or negative, welcome it. Welcome becomes a sacred word, a symbol of consent to the presence and action of the divine therapist. Intentional welcoming is our embracing this therapist, the indwelling spirit that is always present within. And when you have welcomed a sensation, or all the sensations you have welcomed, then let them go by saying, I let go the desire for security, affection, and control. I let go the desire to change what I am experiencing. And so, although it's very likely that you haven't completed this entire body scan, this entire welcoming process, let's come back together and prepare for our silence prayer, We'll have time at the end for questions or comments. And you'll be getting all of this in the chat before we leave today. So let's shift from the silence of welcoming to the silence of prayer with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And James, will you time us for 20 minutes? Okay, thank you.